A government just lost a war it didn't know it was fighting. No army crossed a border. No missile was fired. The enemy was 22 years old with a phone and a grudge in her heart. And in New Delhi, that 22 years old won. How did it happen? Let's explore. I'm Naeem Sidhu. Thank you for sparing some minutes with me. Stay with me, please, because I'll show you a new South Asia. For nearly a century, South Asian states have run on one script. Security means boots of your belt, binoculars fixed on a contested border. But while the generals kept rehearsing that old script, something else was quietly detonating underneath them. Over 60% of South Asia is under the age of 30. And this generation has quietly stopped asking the question their governments spent billions preparing them to ask. They are not asking, who is the enemy? They are asking, why doesn't the state work? That single shift in the question is rewriting the entire subcontinent in real time. Why did millions of young Indians force a sitting education minister to resign within days? How is Pakistan's ruling elite using enforced silence to sit on a volcano that is mathematically bound to erupt? And when a country's youth stop measuring it by its military strength and start measuring it by whether it can be trusted, who actually wins the real war of the 21st century? Turn off the mainstream news. This is the cold reality of what's rewriting South Asia. Here's the paradox we need to sit with first. If the state spent decades manufacturing hostility toward the neighbor, why isn't the youth marching to war? The machinery of division is real and it runs deep. In Pakistan, the Sustainable Development Policy Institute and historian K. Aziz have both documented how public education built an India-centric threat matrix starting in the late 1970s. An entire generation taught to see the border before it learned to see its own budget. Across the frontier, India's NCERT has overseen its own sweeping curriculum overhauls, quietly removing the entire historical chapters under the name of rationalization. Both sides. Both states made the same bet. Control the textbook, control the future. So what broke that bet? Two forces colliding at once. The internet dismantled state monopoly on information. No ministry can gatekeep a smartphone, no matter how much a government spends on installation of firewalls. And economic precarity made the old enemy simply irrelevant to daily survival. Smog doesn't care about the border. Inflation doesn't care about the borders. A freelancer in Lahore, for example, Rawalpindi, Multan, Karachi, refreshing his exchange rate, and a graduate in Bengaluru or Mumbai or Delhi, refreshing his job portal, are now bound by the exact same matrix of survival. One that makes the 1947 border events feel like somebody else inherited movie playing in a theater that they never bought a ticket for. But if the enemy narrative no longer holds their attention, what does? What are they actually pointing their anger at now? Think about what actually costs a state. Every rupee, every paisa spent maintaining a threat narrative is a rupee not spent on the classroom, the clinic, the job market. That generation is drowning in. The old script was never free. It just had a price tag behind the flag for around 80 years. And an entire generation is now the one auditing the bill. That's not radicalism. That's arithmetic done by people who grew up doing their own mathematics. To answer that, look at India first. Because India's Generation Z isn't angry at the state's existence. It's angry at the state's performance. They are proud of 7% growth rate. They are proud of passport that opens door it never used to. They aren't trying to burn the system down. No, they are demanding it actually deliver on the ambition it keeps selling them. Watch what happens the moment That promise breaks. When a wave of exam paper leaks pushed students to suicide, a youth movement calling itself a cockroach Janata Party didn't wait for permission. They filled the streets of Delhi and refused to leave. This wasn't ideology dressed up as protest. It was a flat, unglamorous demand, and that's what make the system honest. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you. New Delhi didn't dig in. Union Minister of Education Dharmendra Pradhan resigned, conceding directly, to the protesters' core demand. The state blinked first and survived because of it. That's the real signal here, not the scandal itself. The government, able to absorb a direct hit from its own youth and course correct, keeps its legitimacy intact for another cycle. It's the same instinct that let India's institution bend without breaking during a dozen smiler crises nobody outside the country ever heard about. Which raises the uncomfortable question hanging over the rest of this region. What happens to a state that gets the exact same demand and refuses to blink? Now, let's cross the border and picture inverts completely. Pakistan's entrenched non-political power centers are still beating the same drum of hyper-securitized patriotism. They have used it for many decades. Strategic depth, existential threats, the usual script recited on schedule. Meanwhile, the actual economy has ground down to near 0% growth, and the state's real administrative rate has eroded across huge stretches of its own territory, regions where on paper the flag flies, but in practice, the state simply isn't there. Ask any young person in Karachi or Peshawar. That keeps them at night, and it isn't the border. Nobody cares. It's the empty wallet. It's the blocked internet. It's watching every door to a better life quietly shut while the official story stays fixed on honor and enemies at the gate. So, why are the streets quiet? This is a question that matters most. Actually, many leading analysts have raised this question and are wondering about this lull. I've seen many tweets, posts on social media from such senior analysts across the world. The silence isn't peace, it's containment, a highly engineered enforcement model built to compress dissent rather than resolve it. One crackdown, one blackout, one arrest at a time, and pressure sealed inside a closed system doesn't disappear. It just waits for a crack. Frame it exactly like that. Not calm, but a subterranean volcano on a very short fuse. The question was never whether it erupts. It's what the state will have left to survive the eruption with, because whatever strategic depth meant on a military map, it means nothing against an economy that cannot hold onto its own youth. Which forces the real question this entire video has been building toward. Here's the uncomfortable comparison nobody in Islamabad wants drawn. Delhi absorbed a direct hit from its youth and came out on the other side with more legitimacy, not less. A government that had simply refused to move, that had tear gassed the exam leak protests into silence instead of conceding, would be sitting on the exact pressure Pakistan sitting on right now. The only difference between manageable protest and a subterranean volcano is whether the state listens before or after the explosion. Now let's see what actually measures a state's power. For decades, power get measured in hardware, tanks, jets, warheads, boots at the border. That model just failed to live stress. That stress test twice in the same region with opposite outcomes. It echoes something the medieval scholar Ibn Khaldun mapped out centuries ago, that a state doesn't collapse the moment its army weakens. No, but it collapses the moment its own people stop believing it deserves to hold power. India bent and held. Pakistan is holding only by refusing to bend. And the World Bank's own South Asia economic update is quietly circling the same conclusion everyone on the ground already knows. The real metric now is state capacity, not the ability to defend a line on a map, the ability to absorb a shock from your own population without collapsing, the ability to give an educated, furious 25-year-old a reason to stay instead of reason to leave. That's the actual battlefield of this decade. And no army in the region is built or funded to fight on it. Max Weber built this entire theory of the state on a monopoly over legitimate force. But legitimate is the word everyone conveniently drops when they quote him. Force without legitimacy isn't state capacity. It's just occupation of your own country. And occupation has never once, anywhere in history, been sustainable past the point its youth stopped consenting to it. So which governments understand this? And which one is still rehearsing the last war? What we just watched isn't a policy disagreement. It's the death of a script nobody under 30 is willing to perform anymore. On one side, a government took a direct hit from its youth and adjusted, bruised but intact. On the other hand, a government is spending its last reserves defending a story its own people stopped believing years ago. The real competition across the region was never about who has more weapons. It's about who can keep their best people from running. Which state actually survives that test? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe to stay ahead of global order. This is Beyond Borders, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for your time.